You know how Donald Trump tried to weasel his way out of one of the several court cases that he's in, the consequences pertaining to his initiating a coup against the Capitol? He said that as the president, he's actually just immune to it, like he can do it because he's the president. You know how that claim got struck down by the judge? The Supreme Court has accepted the appeal. So now we get to further delay the election subversion trial, potentially past the point of the election. There is absolutely no legal precedent for the idea that the president has immunity with regards to any of these crimes. This is an intentional bid from the Supreme Court to delay, either to affirm his immunity and essentially just end democracy functionally in the United States, or even if they deny it, they've still given him months and months to avoid a ruling in this case. The court expedited the case. How nice of them. And will hear the arguments the week of April 22nd. The move puts the frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination on track for another high-stakes date with the High Court, which earlier this month heard arguments in a separate case questioning whether Trump disqualified himself from running for a second term under the 14th Amendment's insurrection ban. Boah, shit talk Germany now, you Yankee motherfucker. Shit talk Germany now, you Yankee motherfucker. The decision is a significant victory for Trump for at least two reasons. He will now be able to argue for sweeping presidential immunity that, if granted, could undermine the bevy of legal challenges he faces, and he will also be able to push off a trial, likely for several weeks at least. It's also the second time the justices have rejected a request from Smith. The special counsel had months ago asked the High Court to take the case before the D.C. Circuit decided it and was rejected. Yeah, because they're delaying. Yeah. If it was going to go up to the Supreme Court, you would have wanted them to take it before the D.C. Circuit decided it, but now more time gets added to the clock. They're literally delaying on purpose? Yep. SCOTUS waited nearly 2 weeks to make the announcement, suggesting there was behind-the-scenes maneuvering. It's hard to read any tea leaves into whether that makes the court more likely to side with former President Trump when it finally resolves his immunity claim, but it certainly means that even in the worst-case scenario for Trump, the January 6th prosecution will be delayed for at least another 3 to 5 months. That's a pretty big win for Trump, even if he ends up losing the case. You guys understand there's a very real possibility that the Supreme Court literally affirms the idea that the president is immune to legal prosecution for crimes committed while in office. Like, there's a very real possibility that the Supreme Court enshrines into jurisprudence the idea that the president is actually above the law, right in time for another Trump presidency. Biden has the chance to do something so funny. The Supreme Court ruling goes out, SEAL Team 6 deployed, media goes dark. Next day, we all wake up. It's a 100% Democrat House and Senate. The court is packed. There are 50 of them, you know. Trump had filed an emergency request at the Supreme Court on the 12th of February asking the justices to block a lower court ruling that he was not immune from Smith's election subversion charges. The former president argued immunity was needed to ensure future presidents are not subjected to criminal charges. Without that guarantee, he said, the presidency as we know it would cease to exist. But that argument went nowhere in the lower courts. A unanimous 57-page opinion from the D.C. Circuit earlier this month rejected the immunity claims. Trump and Smith filed dueling briefs at the Supreme Court over whether the decision should be put on hold. Smith countered in his own filing on February 14th that Trump wasn't close to meeting the standard required to pause proceedings. The High Court Wednesday agreed to decide a relatively narrow question, but one with sweeping implications, whether a former president enjoys immunity from criminal prosecution for acts taken while in office. Smith tried to get ahead of all of this by appealing to the Supreme Court to take this case sooner rather than later last year. Yeah, exactly. Because he had a feeling that it would go to the court anyway, and he wanted it done sooner. It's deliberate. They're deliberately delaying. They are deliberately holding it out because the longer that you delay, the more time Donald Trump has to win. I keep getting this video clip recommended from Brian Tyler Cohen.
Straight in the camera. Here is my request, and I'm going to look straight in the camera and ask everyone who's watching this to amplify and sort of insist on this. If the Supreme Court decides this case on the last day of its term in June, this trial in DC needs to go immediately. You know, we say it is less likely, But here's the deal. There is no.
But if they were going to rule in his favor anyway, why wait? Even then, even if they were going to rule in his favor, it still would be better for us if they did so earlier rather than later, so the legal teams have time to adjust their arguments.
No reason Donald Trump can't stand trial in September. There is no reason Donald Trump can't stand trial in October. There is no reason Donald Trump can't be in the midst of trial on election day. There is no constitutional right to avoid trial because you are running for office. And I worry that people have bought into this idea that there is a point at which it is too late to be fair to Donald Trump. There is no point at which it is too late for Donald Trump to stand trial. So I'd ask all of you to amplify that. Don't let the normalcy of this idea that after some date in late August or September, it's just too late. It is never too late for the criminal justice system.
We will incarcerate him on the day of his inauguration.
Joining us now, NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, and former lead investigator for the January 6th committee, Timothy Hafey. Everybody welcome. So Laura, I'll begin with you. There's a lot of talk about why this Supreme Court wanted to hear this case at all. Can you give us any insight into what you were thinking of?
I think that we're watching a tension at play here. Donald Trump's legal team asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on this on February 12th. So it took them roughly 2 weeks to say, yes, they want to hear it. You only need 5 votes to say, yes, you want to hear it, to grant cert, to actually take up the case. Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court to look at this exact same issue back in December, and they said no. And so my question has been, why say yes now and say no back in December? What has changed in those intervening months? And something must have changed, because they didn't really need the D.C. Circuit to say he's not immune, right? They're gonna look at this with a fresh set of eyes all themselves. So what did they glean by having this long period of delay from December until now? That's the question.
Did they glean?
Because they hate you, because they despise you, because they hate you, because they want democracy to die, obviously.
Or I mean, there are a lot of people out there saying that this is them doing the partisan bidding of Donald Trump, that he likes to delay, is a whole history of delaying. If he delays long enough, this case won't happen before Election Day. And if he wins, then he can dismiss this case outright. Is there credence to say the Supreme Court or some faction of the Supreme Court might be helping him delay?
I don't know that we have any reporting to suggest that. And the fact that they are agreeing to hear it on...
What do you mean reporting to suggest that? They're not going to say it. What do you mean? They're not going to like, oh, we haven't heard them admit that they're deliberately delaying the point at which they hear this case so they can draw time out and give him more time to like win the election before he has to like deal with these cases. Like, why would they're not going to say that.
The week of April 22nd, it was part of the tension that I want to explore, right? Because they didn't just say, oh, well, we'll get to it when we get to it. They're hearing it on what for them is an expedited timeline. Now, they're not hearing it quite as fast as Jack Smith wanted, to be fair.
This is apologia, off. Not quite as here as that. This is like the most pivotal shit imaginable. We're literally talking about like a controversy and scandal burdened former president, like who's about to potentially win re-election, who initiated a coup, whether or not they're above the law. Like this is like some insanely pivotal shit. It's like it's the fulcrum of democracy. It's it's everything. But no, whatever. We'll delay out till April. That's cool. Whatever, man. Haha.
On the other hand, I'm not so sure that it's all that clear that they should take into account when and where the election is taking place, right? Of course, like that's part of the reality of the situation, that this entire case goes away. Jack Smith goes away entirely if the former president is reelected. But we've always been sort of assuming that this all has to happen before the election. And I'm not so sure that these justices actually feel that that is something that is their role to do.
What? Why would the Supreme Court consider the fact that this highly political case is in any way related to the political timetable, especially considering Donald Trump could dismiss the charges against him by pardoning himself if he became president? It's a conservative Supreme Court. Like, why? Insane. Genuinely insane. This is an extremely quick SCOTUS hearing. It shouldn't be happening at all. Quick would have been months ago. They've been delaying this for months.
Could this just be giving him all the due process that he could possibly need or want to go overboard and trying to say that Donald Trump was treated as fairly as possible in our current judicial system?
It could be, but I want to pick up on something that Laura said about what has changed in that period of time between when Jack Smith asked them to review initially and when they decided to take the case. I can think of one thing that changed, and that's Donald Trump filed a motion to dismiss the Florida case on presidential immunity grounds as well. So to the extent that there was anybody who was sort of on the fence about whether to grant cert, the fact that this issue is likely to recur, even though I think that motion is even more of a loser than the presidential immunity defense in the federal election interference case, that could have been the tipping point. And, you know, to Laura's point, it actually takes 4 votes to grant cert, 5 to grant a stay. And they didn't. They granted a stay in effect. But the way that they granted the motion yesterday was by converting Donald Trump's stay motion into a petition for certiorari and granting that. So reading between the...
You're really going to enjoy going on MSNBC after God Emperor Trump, like, wins re-election because nobody showed up to vote for Biden because of the whole genocide thing. He wins re-election, immediately, you know, dismisses the charges against him after he gets inaugurated, cracks down on everything right away, and MSNBC liberals will still be hand-wringing and pearl-clutching over, like, well, you know, procedurally, like, you know, what's the precedent for this? You know, I think it's very irresponsible to do it. It's not... I can't even, like, muster a proper mockery of their behavior. It's just so disappointing.
lines, there may have only
finer line to say there are some instances.
Here we go. Let's talk to a man.
Any argument that this is a
Sensitive moment.
Yeah, absolutely, Katie. Look, but lawyers, responsible ones, only traffic in facts and not speculation. And I don't have any facts which would support any argument that this is a politically
Never mind. I hate men. Never mind. My bad. Sorry, guys. Just remembered. Hate guys.
motivated Supreme Court. I don't assume that because a justice is appointed by the former president that he or she is moral.
This is literally what critical legal theory and critical race theory are about. The idea of, like, a conservative court with conservative judges, 3 of whom were appointed by Trump, delaying for months and then only hearing on appeal this case after it's already been robustly decided and shut down by the DC Circuit Court. Now we're holding it over to the Supreme Court. We're delaying for 2 months, which means in total the Supreme Court could have had this done way earlier. There's no way. I don't factually know this is politically motivated, even though a majority of people in the Supreme Court would benefit materially from Donald Trump being privileged in this way. I don't have any, like, nobody signed a note admitting that they're doing this on purpose.
Loyal to him. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, absent evidence.
They don't even have to take the case? No, they don't. They don't have to take the case. They're not forced to. They chose to.
Of political motivation. Huge political impact, regardless of the motivation, in terms of the timing of the trial, as you have said.
You guys have to understand that, like, however much they've moved over in the past few years, liberals cannot believe that the Supreme Court is biased or partisan. The belief that our cabal of high priests might in any way be, like, influenced or motivated by politics, they can't do it. They just full stop. They cannot do it.
As everyone has said, this pushes it back. It doesn't necessarily push it back beyond the date of the election. There is a scenario by which the court resolves the case very quickly, very soon after the April 22nd oral argument. The Judge Chutkan sets the case for trial 88 days.
Why would they resolve it quick? They either affirm the lower court, in which case, why the fuck are they taking this appeal after delaying on it for months? Or they turn it over and say, yes, actually, the president is above the law. Thank you.
Days from then, which would put us into late summer, early fall, and the case, tried very efficiently and expeditiously by the special counsel, is resolved by Election Day. That is getting increasingly difficult to predict. Perhaps unlikely, but there is still a scenario by which the case is resolved. And I do think there's a paramount public interest in having this case finally see its day in court. Government presents its case, the defendant entitled to his presumption of innocence, challenges the evidence. That has the potential to move the needle of public opinion.
So the systems of our forefathers to presumed innocence, the people will see the...
God.
Way beyond anything the Select Committee did, or with all due respect, journalists or anybody else do in terms of credibility of the finding.
Could there be something in the D.C. court ruling that basically just blew Donald Trump's argument of immunity out of the water? Could there be something in that very long decision that the Supreme Court doesn't entirely agree with? Maybe they want to draw a finer line to say there are some instances when the president is using his decision-making ability in a tough situation, maybe it's a drone strike somewhere, where they should enjoy a certain level of immunity.
Yeah, look, the court, there probably are justices on the court who take issue with some or all of the D.C. Circuit opinion, right? The grant of cert suggests that at least there is some potential controversy on the Supreme Court.
Wow, that's crazy. A 6-3 conservative court, 3 of whom were appointed by Trump. Clarence Thomas's wife literally pushing for the coup attempt that he's on trial for. Yeah, man, I wonder if there's any kind of bias or political motivation
that would call into question the D.C. Circuit's really careful, really thorough opinion. I don't think there's
They're bobbing heads. Meanwhile, Trump's team is literally throwing a party over the Supreme Court taking up this case. That's so cool. I'm sure there's no political motivation whatsoever behind this thing that obviously, objectively, materially benefits this political candidate in this political case.
Any chance that President Trump wins this case at the Supreme Court? Again, responsible lawyers here kind of universally have handicapped this as a very strong case for the special counsel. Whether there's a justice or two who wants to try to narrow the standard or even dissents from a majority finding of affirmance of the D.C. Circuit, that there's a chance of that. But I do think that this case is headed for a criminal trial without the president being granted blanket immunity.
Are you entirely confident that they're going to hand down a decision by the end of this term, by June? They're not just going to sit on it until the next term.
No, you can't be entirely confident about anything with the Supreme Court. It's a bit of a black box. I do think
that's great. Thank you, man. Thanks. That's great.
The fact that they issued an expedited briefing schedule demonstrates that they are mindful of the need for prompt resolution. I think at the very latest, we would see an opinion at the very end of their term, which is around July 1st. I think there's a decent chance that they'll issue an opinion in the case very soon after the April 22nd oral argument, given the urgency of getting this case for trial. Right? It is really paramount for America that these allegations are tried in a federal criminal proceeding. And I hope that...
they are? It's a federal case and a D.C. Circuit Court ruled on it in a 57-page ruling where they crushed the Trump team's arguments? And the Supreme Court has multiple times not heard this out beforehand and have delayed to like the last possible point they could? Like, seriously, the Supreme Court couldn't have like drawn this out as much. They're like maximizing for it.
That judges believing in the rule of law see that and facilitate that by resolving this as quickly as possible.
That's great. Thank you. Oh, this is from the clip that we saw from Brian Tyler Cohen.
With me tonight, my good friends Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell, hosts of The Rachel Maddow Show and The Last Word right here on MS.
Man, they both have like Pixar head shapes, don't they? Right, like right next to each other especially. It's like a perfect oval and a perfect rectangle.
MSNBC. Rachel, I will say something. I am mad at myself for how surprised I was. I was mad at myself as the time went by, the 2.5 weeks, I think a lot of people thought, and this was with informed speculation by people I respect, people who've clerked on the court, people who've been around the court, studied the court, know the court. There is no way they could take 2.5 weeks only then to say we're taking the case 7 weeks from now. What was your reaction to the order today?
I mean, I don't think you should be mad at yourself. I don't think you should be embarrassed. I think everybody sort of thought that was the only kind of decent explanation for how long they were taking, that they were going to not take up the case, that maybe Samuel Alito or one of the other real MAGA judges was going to be really mad about it, was going to write an angry dissent, was biding for as much time as he could because this was his last chance to insert delay, which of course is what Trump wants. I think that was, you know, if you think about the court as the Supreme Court of the United States and a rational actor and a decent one, that was a reasonable supposition, and it just turns out they're not that. And Chris, I feel you in terms of the emotion that you're bringing to this right now.
I can't watch this. Whatever. It's nothing. I don't want to watch this shit, man. Weimar moment or a Weimar moment? Yeah, definitely a Weimar moment. 100%. Yeah, We're really running through the classics right now. Hey Vosh, you got your passport, lol? Yes, I do. You all should as well. It's just, things really do seem to be falling apart. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how things pan out, I guess. You never know for sure. Any number of wacky things could happen at any point in time. I mean, that being said, though, like, you have to like focus your area of control and attention to stuff that you actually can affect. And I think we can all robustly agree that basically everything we're dealing with right now is an almost direct consequence of the either deliberate failure or incompetence of the liberals in this country. You know, there is no real power center of the left, so it's that or the right, and the right is doing exactly what the right is supposed to be doing from their perspective. They're doing the fascism thing. It's not subtle. It's been pretty clear what they've been doing for a while now. Nobody should be surprised looking at it. Nobody should look at the GOP and go like, oh, wow, they're subverting democracy for the 50th time. Who could have expected that? They are a force of nature moving as one would expect them to. Obviously, the thing you would expect the liberals to do is try to stop them, but they have just been remarkably incompetent. Biden's handling of the situation in Palestine is a very real possibility of throwing the election over to Donald Trump. That, along with a million other obvious, easily avoidable mistakes the Democrats have made, and up even to this point, like nothing is getting taken seriously. Even if they don't like agree with the people who take up the case and they affirm the decision of the D.C. Circuit Court, Alex Karras, it still delays the case.